And welcome to Green Acres Middle School, where we are doing Unit COVID-19.
Earth's place in the universe.
But wait, there's more. If you call now, we'll start talking about our observations from the previous lessons.
That's amazing.
Yes. In lesson 1, which was our initial model, we found that the Earth was in the center and everything was spinning around it, which was geocentric, and that was messed up.
Totally wrong.
So we moved on from there, and we started going to lesson 2. Coach Parrish?
Lesson 2 model talks about a heliocentric model that we go around the sun. Not in a perfect circle, but a ellipse. And we also rotate on an axis, one of those things, whatever it is, counterclockwise.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so lesson 3 model. In the lesson 3 model, how we figured out how we get our seasons. And how we get our seasons is by the tilt of the Earth. When we're tilted away from the sun, the northern hemisphere has winter, the southern hemisphere has summer. When we're tilted towards the sun, the northern hemisphere has summer, while the southern hemisphere has winter.
And then we have our lesson 4 model, I'll call it 4A, and we talk about how the amount of sun depends on who gets it, where it is, and its turn on its axis. So during the summertime, in the northern hemisphere, the North Pole gets 24 hours of daylight, but the South Pole gets nothing. And on this side, when we're tilted away, the northern hemisphere, or the North Pole in this area during winter, gets sad face, no sunlight, but the southern hemisphere, or the South Pole, gets a lot.
Happy face. And how that happens is the light's being spread out. So over here we have being tilted away, so the North Pole's getting no light being spread out, while the South Pole is getting light, but that light is spread out. So it's still going to be cold, but it's still going to have light 24 hours a day. But in the opposite season, the Earth's tilted towards the sun. They're going to get light 24 hours at the North Pole, but it's going to be cold because that warmth of the sun is spread out over a large area. And the South Pole is going to have no light. It's going to be darkness for 24 hours. And that brings us into our lesson 5 model, which we talked about previously.
Which was about the moon phases. And we talked about how we always start with a new moon, and then it goes through this cycle until we hit a full moon. That's about halfway through the cycle, about 14 days. And then it goes up to a new moon. So all this is going to be waxing, getting brighter, and then once it hits the full moon, it's going to be waning, getting less.
And it's not the moon that's changing, it's what?
It's our perspective.
So half of the moon always has light on it,
and the other half does not.
And what you're able to see is how we get our different phases of the moon. Makes perfect sense.
Sounds right to me.
So at the end of the last lesson, what we started talking about is, okay, one half of the moon's always lit up, one half of the moon's always darkness, but what happens if the Earth blocks out the light on the moon? And what happens if the moon blocks out the light from the sun? And what was that called?
The end of the world.
Oh, that's right. But if it's not the end of the world, what is that called?
Oh, it's called an eclipse.
That makes more sense. And that's actually where our next lesson is. It's lesson 6, what causes an eclipse. So a lot of times when you think of the moon's orbit around the Earth, and it's a nice, happy little moon and a happy little Earth, and the moon's going perfectly flat around the Earth in a nice little happy circle.
That's just happy.
But as you know, life is never happy.
Oh.
And that's not how it is. It's actually not a perfect circle. Just like the Earth's orbit around the sun, it's an ellipse. It's a stretched out circle. And the moon's orbit is tilted, just like the Earth is tilted and everything else is tilted.
Amazing.
And tell us about that tilt, Coach Barry.
Well, in the moon's orbit, it's actually tilted at a 5-degree tilt. And this tilted path is why ellipses are so rare.
Eclipses.
Sorry, eclipses of the heart. Anyway, they're so rare. If the moon's orbit was flat, we would have an eclipse
once a month.
Every 28 days. And so, since it's not a flat, perfect little surface that it moves on, the little orbit, when it goes around, that's what makes it rare. And it's the perfect position must happen, the perfect situation must happen for them to appear. So everything must fall perfectly for this to occur.
So it's almost like all the infinity stones must be collected together, and all of them must be together for this to happen.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I am Iron Man.
So So what it gets into is there's two different types of eclipses. The first type of eclipse is called the total solar eclipse. Now it's called a solar eclipse because the sun is being blocked out. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
And the moon causes a shadow on Earth and it's blocking out the sun in that area. So you have the sun, you have the Earth, you have the light from the sun, and then the moon, it gets in between the sun and the Earth based on its orbit, and the moon causes a shadow on Earth. But to see that eclipse, you must be in that perfect spot right there. There's nowhere else would they see the eclipse. It's almost like the location is important.
Location, location, location.
Location, location, location.
Location, location, location.
Amazing. So everywhere else, they wouldn't really see a total eclipse. If you're really close to that circle, you might see part of the eclipse. If you're in that little black circle right there from the moon, you would see a total eclipse of the heart. So what about a lunar eclipse? Oh, by the way, sorry. Solar eclipses are very rare. They happen about every 18 months or so. But for a position on Earth to have a solar eclipse, it has one solar eclipse every about 400 years in that one spot. So they're very rare. They're very difficult to happen. So the next one is a lunar eclipse. What's a lunar eclipse, Coach Parrish?
A total lunar eclipse is when the moon is being blocked and the Earth causes a shadow on the moon. Now, you have the sun over there, you have Earth over here, so how can we cause a shadow on the moon? Well, it can't be over here. It has to be on this side.
You mean when we have a full moon?
Yes, a full moon. So what happens is, as the moon orbits and gets in between, gets on our side, and we come between it and the sun, it actually blocks all the light to it. And then it is sometimes, on rare occasions, it will appear red, which is kind of cool.
Very.
Blood moon, kind of like that.
Yeah.
And they occur somewhere on Earth about every 4 to 6 months on average, and they're not as rare as total solar eclipses are. They happen more frequently.
Okay, so those were total eclipses. That's where the light's completely blocked out.
Correct.
Is it possible for just some of the light to be blocked out?
Absolutely.
And what are those called?
We call those partial eclipses, where only part is being blocked out. Again, depends on location, location, location.
Location, location, location.
Location, location, location.
Perspective of where you are.
So it's this whole unit's been about location, 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 and about your perspective of things.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So partial eclipses are a little bit more common. Less situations have to happen for it to happen, but a total eclipse is a lot more rare.
Yes, because you're talking about the sun being blocked out, and well, we know the moon's not the size of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to be at the right angle, right place for it to seem or appear to block out the sun. But on the other eclipse form, we have the lunar eclipse. Earth is bigger than the moon, so we can definitely block the sun more than the moon can, which is why it happens more often.
There we go. So let's talk about our models. Now, our models came from the previous slides that we kind of already showed you, so sorry, no clap trips this time. But we have the total solar eclipse. We have the moon causing a small little shadow on the Earth. And so right there where that shadow is, that's a total eclipse. Right around it would be a partial eclipse. And the further you move away from it, you won't be able to see it. So a couple of years ago, we had a total solar eclipse that went through Arkansas and Tennessee.
Yes.
Here in Louisiana, you could go outside, and if you had your special eclipse glasses, you could see a partial eclipse here in Louisiana because we were close enough to that circle.
Yes.
But if you were in Tennessee or Arkansas, you would have had a total eclipse. But if you were up in Canada or down in South America, you wouldn't have seen anything. What about a total lunar eclipse?
So a total lunar eclipse, as you know, the Earth's now blocking the light from the sun, so it casts a massive shadow that would then block out the light reflecting. There would be no light really reflecting all from the sun to make it appear bright, except you'll watch a video later about the red part of it. And so this can be seen in this whole surface area because, again, we're doing the blocking, not the moon.
So people in Louisiana could see it just as well as people in South America if it's both the nighttime for them.
And England, yes.
There we go. So that's our model, and what that finally gets into is our lesson summary, our model tracker here. And so our lesson question at the beginning of this lesson was, what causes an eclipse? And what we figured out is, first of all, an eclipse is caused by one object blocking the sun's light and casting a shadow. So there are other types of eclipses. You can have a meteor or comet move through and cause a tiny little shadow. It would be a meteor eclipse or something like that. So you still have situations like that. A lunar eclipse, the moon is being blocked out, is caused by the Earth's shadow on the moon. And a solar eclipse, or the sun being blocked out, is caused by the moon passing directly in front of the sun.
Yes. And a solar eclipse can only be seen from certain parts of the Earth during the day. You have to be in what's called the path of totality.
Mm-hmm. And you'll learn a little bit more about that after the lesson.
Yes. And let's see here. A lunar eclipse can be seen at night.
Plain and simple.
And these events occur in intervals that can be tracked and predicted.
In fact, the ancient Mayans, way before technology, were able to predict the exact day, time, hour, minute that an eclipse would happen. So if you know about the orbit, the rotation of the Earth and the orbit of the sun, or Earth around the sun, and the moon's orbit, and you take all that information together, you can predict exactly when an eclipse is going to happen. So you can go on Google right now, well, after the video, and type in when will be the next eclipse, and it will give you the next eclipse for hundreds of years because we can predict it. But what's interesting, and we'll get into more about it later, is that the moon is changing a little bit. It's making eclipses a little bit different. But what was our evidence of all this, Coach Parrish?
So our evidence was using our model to show that sometimes shadows cover the moon or parts of Earth.
Awesome. So let's think about what we're going to do after this. There's some really good videos put out by National Geographic that goes in a lot more detail than we could about lunar and solar eclipses. Plus, National Geographic has a little bit better of a budget than us.
Oh, yeah.
So they have a lot better graphics. Mr. Gallant and Coach Parrish has been putting a ball on a stick and moving it around. They can actually do computerized stuff. So you're going to watch two videos that are going to be attached with this lesson. And then there's also a reading that goes back to some of these ancient Indian tribes. I think it's the Lakota, and what they believed eclipses were. And it's actually a really good read that I think you're going to enjoy. But that leads me into where we're going to go next, Coach Parrish. So we've been talking about the phases of the moon. We've been talking about how the moon is eclipsed or causes an eclipse.
Right.
But we really haven't talked about, why is the moon around Earth?
Like, why does it go around us?
Well, why is it there? Are they dating? Why does it stick with us after all these years?
I didn't see no scrunchie on it, so I don't think they're dating.
So why is the moon orbiting around Earth? Why isn't it flying away? Why isn't it crashing into us? It's kind of an interesting question. And I think that's what we need to address in our next lesson, which will be Lesson 7. So we will see you then.